Yo, welcome to Faded Town, number one Pokemon podcast in the world. These are facts. Look them up in a book, Google them, Pokestat them. There's probably a Limitless page. There's a Twitter, something. Just it's out there. I promise. We're the best. I know we leave a lot, but it is what it is. But we're back at it with our Road to Worlds kind of four podcast thing that we're doing. And this week, or today, we got Pablo Meza with us. It's been a while. It's been a different season for him, so it's gonna be fun to talk to you, man. How's everything going?
Everything's going really well, thank you. It has been quite the different season rather than the usual hyper competitive go to every event. I ended up casting more ICs than I actually played, so
That's
it's been different, but I've really had a good time casting.
that's what's up. That's what I kind of want to dive into. I want to kind of talk about. We had COVID. COVID was a thing. We didn't play for 2 years. Then we came back. We had a little, like, half a season thing, and then we had a full season. Kind of talk about that, and then we'll talk about your preparation for Worlds, and then some predictions. Sound good?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's perfect.
so when COVID ends, we got the short season started. I think it was almost basically NAIC. Just they did NAIC like right off the bat,
No, we
and
did EUIC, and
yeah,
then we
yeah,
did.
EUIC. I mean, yeah, yeah. And like I'm looking at your Limitless page, and you can like every year is just stacked of finishes, and you hit everything. And even in the short like half a season, you got three like top finishes. And then we'll talk about this season. You only have three finishes this season, but you also cast a lot, which is a new thing for you, which is really cool. But how did you feel going into like taking almost 2 years off? Especially because you do Pokemon for like a living. Like when
Yeah.
COVID hit, like what was your mindset with that? Because I don't think anyone's really talked to you about that before. Like that had to
No,
be crazy, right?
it was very difficult. Yeah, I mean, in the beginning there was a lot of uncertainty, right? Nobody knew
Mm,
how long the
yeah.
everything would go on for, right? COVID or the cancellation of events and stuff like that. So the first few months, like it was business as usual, right? We were all
Mm,
waiting it out in our houses, and we just assumed that, like, okay, within a month, maybe two, right, we would get back into
yeah.
things. But then everything kept getting postponed and canceled and canceled. And like I still made content, I was still doing coaching, but of course, both of them, like my motivation has always been the competition, right? I love Pokemon, but I
Mm-hmm.
love competing even more. So when I'm not competing, I'm not dedicating a lot of my spare time to Pokemon otherwise, you know?
Yeah.
And the same happened with other people, right? With the people that I coach, like, why do you need coaching if there's no tournaments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were online circuits, and Limitless tried their best to like keep the game going with that, and the online platform is outstandingly
Yeah.
made. However, that only gets you so far. Yeah, the feeling of the cards, the real life events, seeing other people, meeting with your friends, hang out, nothing compares to that, right? So
Right.
it was definitely like a weird transition or a weird space in the beginning where no one knew, but then slowly but surely things started dropping off viewership, coaching students, etc. To a point where, like, by the time they announced the tournaments were going back, that's when my like whole Tablemon thing was at its worst, essentially. Yeah, my
Yeah.
business was earning the least amount of money. Sponsors were the ones that were still like keeping the boat afloat
That's
because the
good.
content was still happening and people were still buying codes, were still playing online and whatnot, and still buying cards, right? Even though people could
Yeah.
not play with them officially, they were still buying cards. So that helped. And then when tournaments finally came back, I knew I had to, like, my whole business, my whole persona, my whole like everything that I love about Pokemon relies or it is connected to competing, right? And my
Right.
tournament results and my tournament experience and what I offer through coaching and through my YouTube channel is my expertise, if you will, right? So I
Yeah.
knew I had to make a strong comeback into into the tournament scene as soon as things got back going. So I planned to go to every event as soon as they were announced, right? So I went to Salt Lake City, I went to a UIC, and the first tournament back though, which was Salt Lake City, that was weird. Yeah, because after 2 years of generally like I lost the muscle memory of shuffling the cards. Like I lost a round purely because I forgot to draw a prize, right? I've been drawing prizes for 20 years and I can count on one hand the amount of times I've generally forgotten to take a prize. And also like the amount of penalties that I've received in a single tournament, it's that one. Yeah, like I had more penalties just because like I drew an extra card off of my Genesect. Yeah, because I had 5 Pokemon in play. I drew a 6 because I was an automatic pilot, and online, it happens automatically. So all of that factored in, I had the most penalties I've ever had, which was 2, in a single tournament. But like historically, I could have it's very rare for me to get any sort of penalty. So I don't know. It was a weird comeback, but as soon as I stepped into the room and felt like everyone and the atmosphere and I roomed with friends and everything, like I knew it was in the right spot, and I knew that it was only a matter of time for things to get back into the full swing of things.
Yeah, I remember that tournament. You coached Kevin, which is one of my good friends, and he did the best he's ever done.
But no, you're thinking of Salt Lake City.
Oh, that's the next one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right. We're gonna back that one.
Yeah.
I forgot they were so close to each other. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I'm trying to even think what happened at that one. I don't even know. I know I was there.
Drew Kennett won with
Gengar VMAX. Yeah.
VMAX squad as it was at its heights. Our V-Star had just been released. That was the beginning of the salvation of Pokemon, because the VMAX era, of course, I'm never going to say thank you, COVID. Finally, if there was a time to stop Pokemon, it was when we were in that horrible phase of pick your favorite color VMAX, slap in 4 crushing hammers into the deck, and call it a day. Yeah, that was the worst. I've played every single format in Pokemon. That's the absolute worst garbage that ever happened to Pokemon in the history of the game.
I agree. I think there were so many memes online about I'm so glad we don't have to fly across the country to get crushing hammered 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That was the point where people were talking about reducing the time limit, because you didn't need 50 minutes to finish 3 games. You needed 25 to go through a best of 3.
Yeah. Half times have changed. It's so wild. We'll talk about that too, because I talked to a couple of people about the time stuff. But and then you had a 25th at EUIC, and then a 6th, a top 8 at Indy, and then at Worlds you got 17th, which is nutty.
Yeah, balled out of top 16, which was awkward.
That does suck. But
my stream match there, I made a brutal mistake against Isaiah. I had the game won, essentially. I just needed to be patient. And being 100%, my mind was already in the winner's interview. Yeah, I was already I'm going to skip this other thing. But then what happened was Isaiah very cleverly ghosted up my Reggie, right? I had been very careless with my energy attachments. I was being very cocky and very overconfident. I didn't care what energies I was attaching. I knew I had the game won, right? So then he brought up my Regigigas, which has a 4 retreat cost, and I had exactly 4 energies in my discard pile. But when that happened, I panicked. And so instead of just attaching 1 that turn and waiting, and then the next turn attaching 3 and retreating my Regigigas, I attached all 3. So then Isaiah went and played another Ghost effect on a different Reggie, and I lost the game because of that.
I do remember this now.
All I had to do was think about it a little bit more. And it's so easily explained, right? But at that moment, between the fact that I was already in the winner's interview and then I got flustered at what he did, and I don't know, it was just a weird, and I ended up tying a game that would have put me at 401 at the World Championships.
That's rough. Yeah. But overall, you've done pretty well at Worlds throughout the year. So you have a top 8 in 2017. And you got 51st in 19.
Yeah.
Those type of events you really thrive in, to be honest, right? Is your preparation for that a lot different?
I wouldn't say it's a lot different. What I try to, or how I approach the World Championships is that's where of course, you're gonna play against the highest concentration of the highest skilled players in the world, right? Therefore,
Yeah.
your margin in terms of being better than someone with your decision making or with your skill is going to be at the lowest it's ever been. Yeah, you might find a margin here and there, but that's where it should be at the lowest ever, right? So then, if you have in Pokemon the how to succeed, you need to have skill, luck, and deck building, right? All those three things affect. Luck is out of your control. Skill will be at the minimum, it will be throughout the whole season, right? Because you're round one, the chance of you facing another incredibly high skilled player is extremely high, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, you have deck building, right? So that's where hopefully you can make a splash, or that's where the potential reward for trying to come up either with something new or trying to find an edge somewhere within a deck or a hole in the metagame, like I tried last year with Regigigas, is where the potential reward for that is at its highest, as opposed to a normal regional or international where you're going to play just so many rounds that you just need to make sure that your deck does the same thing over and over, right? Okay. At Worlds, especially when you have a date to invite, you're only playing 8 rounds, so depending on attendance, it could be 7. So that's where you can sacrifice perhaps a matchup or something and just hope you don't face that and you hit the right matchups and you're off to the races to top 8.
I think that's that's something no one's ever said. I think that's really cool perspective because like you said, like throughout the season you want to play like the most consistent deck. You want to do the same thing over and over. But when you get to Worlds, you want to try to be one step ahead of them because especially if you do have that day 2. You're only going to play 7 rounds. Like, matchups are kind of like, maybe I just won't hit that one. Like, I'll sacrifice that matchup and I'll play these 2 different cards that really, like, throw this matchup off. That's really good. That's not something people really talk about, but
that's like a logic you can also apply to locals, because locals are hyper concentrated metagames. Usually you'll know like who are the people to beat, and if those people to beat are the ones that like are trending and usually stick to a deck or whatever it is, then you can definitely like really target down and base your deck choice around that. Of course, the World Championship is another but it's like that sort of logic also applies where you can give yourself there's an inherent differential in skill. Luck is out of your control, but then if you can complement luck with a specific deck choice, then all of a sudden you're just winning decks. You're winning games, just by like showing up and doing what your deck wants to do. I won a league challenge recently where I knew the metagame here in Mexico locally has been all about Lugia, Guardy, and Lost Box. So I showed up with Arc, Umbreon, Dura, and I won the league challenge basically with my eyes closed. It was the easiest tournament I won, just because I did the simple thing that I was trying to do, and that was it.
Right. That's kind of funny. Like the two like things that are like so far away from each other, like local play and Worlds. It's kind of you kind of use the same mindset in both of them, and that's such a funny take. Like people always think, oh, it's like the most competitive thing, which it is. Like you are, like you said, you're playing against the best players in the world. I was talking this with Kenneth or Drew Kenneth, where like no one really talks about how like Pokemon isn't a pro scene. Like Pablo isn't gonna play Azul every tournament. Like Pablo, like your average player can just come and play with you guys. So like the game's no one really talks about how that happens, and it isn't till Worlds that you really get like a real consolidated, like these players are here to play. And even then some players are just happy to have a Worlds invite, so like it gets there's that mix up too. So it's really cool to see like, hey, I kind of have the same mindset of like I only play 7 rounds at Worlds. And like locals, I'm not playing many rounds, and I kind of know the good players that are in day 2. So like I have a good idea. Like, hey, Azul likes to play Lost Box a lot. These players like to play this. It's like, let me try to figure out. I'll take this matchup loss here, but if I get up against Azul, I know I got this advantage because I play such and such card, which is like a really cool mindset.
Mhm.
So
And
let's talk about this season then. So
yeah,
normally we see 6 to 8 finishes with you. This season we only see 3. We got one at San Diego, one at Charlotte, and then EUIC. You got third, which is a great, like, fantastic thing. But at the end of the day, you did start casting, which is like, I wanted to bring that up because it was funny because that was it 2019 where you took that picture where you
yeah,
photobombed you
yeah,
photobombed the
either
casters.
2019 or 2018. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I
Photo
think
bomb.
it's photobombed the casters, and now you're a caster, which is like such a funny turnaround. But has casting always been something you wanted to do?
So it was always in the back of my mind as a potential like natural progression, if you will. I mean, you see it in sports, right? The good players,
True.
they retire, they become casters. So I also figured, like, I mean, I love playing. I hope I get to play until either Pokemon drops off or until the last day I live. However, I'm also 35 years old, like,
Mhm.
and uh, there's changes in my life priorities, there's changes in my life perspective, there's changes in my day to day, in my motivation as well, for many things in life, and especially one thing that is very important to me right now is financial security, especially after what happened with COVID and how like I got a part-time job to be able to sustain a little bit more, weather the storm. Essentially, I no longer have that job. I'm back to 100% full-time Pokemon, but it was also like a scary like drop bucket of cold water of like, you know what, like things could change, right? Things could
Yeah.
be, so don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I figured casting, I was very grateful that they called me up for LAIC, in part because as a Latin American, right? It was really
True.
cool to be able to cast that specific tournament. And it's just like, it's an extra incentive for me to continue to do what I do. And it's a different avenue to continue to share my knowledge, right?
Right.
And even though I hold myself to the highest standard and any tournament that I don't win, I'm disappointed to a certain degree. I also know that I don't have to play every tournament, right? And even though I have not been able to win an international championship or a world championship, I've come so close that
Hmm.
I know a little bit of a slightly luckier turnaround. I could have 2 IC titles and 2 world titles under my belt, right? So,
True.
like, it would be lovely to have them, but I don't feel like I need to prove anymore,
Okay.
in terms of my skill, in terms of who I am and what I can accomplish. And therefore, this is just like a different challenge. It's a different way. It definitely entails a lot more than people, I think, imagine, including myself. Yeah, before doing it, I figured, yeah, you just sit down and talk about Pokemon. Super easy, but it entails so much more than that in terms of preparation, in terms of what happens behind the scenes. Even when you're not casting, you're actively involved in everything that's happening. So it's been a really incredible experience. I was very happy that they debuted me at an IC as well. And then I also got the call up for NIC. So I'm hoping next season I'll have even more opportunities to be able to cast. Yeah. And
Yeah.
now, being fair, I did cast 3 tournaments and I attended 8. Yeah. So my results were mostly because I kept making silly mistakes or I lost a bunch of win and ends. Yeah. I could have
Yeah.
made day 2 at every event I attended. Sometimes I got unlucky at what was after Charlotte? Knoxville, I think.
Yeah, I
I
think
made
so.
a game losing mistake on my win and end on stream in a game that I had already won. Yeah, basically.
Right.
But the only way I could mess it up was by um doing what I did, and that's exactly what I did. So it's like
Yeah.
I could have easily had 8 day 2 this season. I brain farted or got unlucky more than I would have liked. Yeah, and that's Pokemon. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Which, I mean, you think you think doing the casting threw you off a little bit, or not at all?
I honestly don't think so. Maybe in Toronto, like I knew I was casting LAIC, and Toronto was the weekend immediately after, right? And because I knew I was casting LAIC, I didn't like go out of my way to practice the amount of games that I usually practice, right? So I think that might like the time between I was back from LAIC Monday night and then Thursday night I was already leaving for Toronto. Like I ended up playing Lugia because I had watched Lugia do what it did at LAIC. I had played with Lugia a lot, but what I really wanted to play was Lost Box, Rayquaza, Raikou, which is what I ended up playing for the next 6 tournaments in a row, which is something I usually never do either. I just love that deck. So I feel like with a little bit more time, I would have decided on that deck and probably would have done better. So I feel like it influenced in the sense that it ate up time that I would have used otherwise to prepare for the event. But I generally don't think it influenced my rest of my season, and I think the UIC finish definitely shows that.
Showed it. That's true. You did really well there. I kind of want to jump back into casting because, there ain't much opportunity to talk to people that have cast, and I think a lot of casters get a lot of shit for the way things happen, but I think, like you said, people don't understand what goes into it. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and I personally really enjoyed. There's definitely segments with you and what is his name? You guys talked like history of Pokemon for like a minute.
With Kyle Sable.
Yeah, with Kyle. Yeah. That I don't. That personally, that stuff's like really good to me. But like, what's the toughest thing you think when you're going into when you have to cast? Is it when there's that downtime between rounds where you guys have to try to like fill it, or is it like casting the game? I would assume for you, because you play very often, isn't as like hard as someone that is just casting. Am I on the right page here?
So I mean, of course, I can't speak for all the others. We all have different backgrounds, different experiences. I personally like. For me, the most difficult part has been exactly what you mentioned. Yeah, those sort of downtimes, those sort of times where I have to be a little bit more of an entertainer rather than an analyzer, just because of who I am, and my personality. It's also something that I get told a lot on YouTube, on my videos. It's like, put more energy into what you're saying, or like get more excited. You pulled, like I did once. I opened Battle Styles, a booster box. Like I never do that stuff. Pokemon sent me a box, I opened it, and I pulled like an alternate art Urshifu V or whatever. Yeah, and I was like, oh cool, this card is cool. And then I moved on. And I got comments like, dude, that's a $200 card at the time it was, or whatever. You're more excited. Why didn't you put it in as leave immediately? Blah blah. And it's like, that's not my perspective, right? So I know it's part of the job, and it's something that I have to develop as well. And I think from LAC to NAC, it got a little bit better, but that's definitely for me the hardest part. When I'm talking about Pokemon, that's the most natural thing for me to do. That's what I do literally every day, all the time. But that extra part where you have to burn time, you have to make up for the fact that a game ended early, or there's some sort of delay or whatever it is, but you're on camera, right? It's your time. So then you have to improvise, talk about other things, and that's where I feel very grateful that I've casted with 3 different people. The 3 events that I've casted, I've had different partners in each, and all 3 of them have been incredible at like helping me out. Because I've been more in the analytical role, they've been more in the like get excited and comment on what's happening and
the counter casting.
So they've been, they're 50% of why people have enjoyed what I do. Like they helped me out so much, especially at LAC, my first event. Freya, Kyle, and Chip, like they were outstanding and like showing me the ropes, explaining everything. It was incredible to get their help. So that's the most difficult part, but it also made so much easier by the incredible group of people that we have.
Yeah, I think that's why I like the segment where you and Kyle just talked Pokemon, like old Pokemon stuff, because it was very authentic. Like it, don't get me wrong, I get it. People have to like be excited or whatever, but that's definitely not you. And it, like when you're just sitting there talking with Kyle about Pokemon, you could tell that like that's something you really know, that's something you're passionate about. It's very authentic. There's no fakeness, there's no nothing. And like I'm really into like the history of the game and stuff like that. So it was really cool.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate
but yeah, I think like your analytics, like you being on the analytics side is definitely like the best role for you. Color, like you said, it's not really your cup of tea, but like if that's something you work on, it is. But I really like watching you do the play by play of what's going on, and you kind
I think
of even uh,
yeah, like that plays to my current strength, which
yeah,
is I'm the most active player out of the whole group, right? And
yeah,
I'm like getting to the top four of EUIC. So I think like that's what that's the best asset that I can bring to the team to supplement everyone else's skills and different
hmm
abilities. So
yeah,
I think
like
I'm
watching
well.
you. Yeah, watching you be like, you almost already know the play that's about to happen. You're like, all right, this is the most optimal, and it's good to see that because I think a lot of people do like. I'm not gonna say like it's horrible, but I feel like a lot of people do get crap when like when catchers don't have a clue what's about to happen, or like they're oblivious, or this and that, and I felt like your aspect brought to the table where like we didn't see that. It was like, oh, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. Pablo already's like these three things could happen. Boom, and then you would see it happen. You're like, oh man, I didn't even see that. Like Pablo, like I didn't even see that play. And he already like called it out perfect. Like I think that aspect brings a lot to the table, and I appreciate you out there, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool.
And then another thing that's been a little difficult for me, I don't know, it's like being in front of, there's a different pressure when I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
at home recording for my YouTube channel versus when I'm sitting at the booth presenting for Pokemon, right? So that's also like, and I think you can tell like the first few rounds that I've casted in each tournament compared to the last few rounds, my like fluidity, my the level at which I speak, yeah, is also very different. Just because I get more comfortable in the spot, so that will hopefully
Oh, 100%.
get better and change if I get more opportunities to do so.
Yeah, well, I agree with that 100%. Like, even just doing this podcast, like, I took almost a year off coming back. Like, I just put out the first one. I'm like, oh, I think that was horrible. I was like, I'm not in the podcast. Like, I got to get back to like being comfortable talking to people and like having a better flow and like to. That's why I give all the casters so much like praise because like there's a lot of pressure. Like people don't
Yeah,
understand how much of like just getting up there talking is like that's public speaking. It's tough. Like I mean, at the end of the day, you're gonna get criticized no matter what you do. Like people are gonna criticize you, but you gotta remember like it takes so much just to get up there and do anything, let alone do it correctly. Like you're like, oh my god, it's so much. Because like even doing the podcast, like I'm literally, it's my choice. I could do this podcast right now and just not put it out and be like, oh, I don't think it was good. But like when it's live like that, there ain't nothing. Like what happens happens. So you got to be on your A game as soon as it starts. And like I'm like in my head, I'm like I'm gonna do podcasts down the road. They're gonna get better. Like I'm cool with that. There's no opportunity. Like obviously there's opportunities to do other ones, but that product is put out there live. It is what it is. It is.
yeah.
It's tough. But yeah, let's jump back into. Let's finish it off real quick. Let's just talk about worlds. What's your preparation for this worlds? Do you have a testing group? Are you testing alone, or is the meta shifting from NAIC, or do you think everything that we've seen at NAIC is it? Like no one held anything back. Yeah, those type of things.
So, in terms of my personal testing, what happened since EUIC, now that I think it's a combination of like the result that I had, but also locals coming back, I'm now back to like full to the brim, like really difficult to not have a day full of either 7, 8, or 9 hours of coaching between
Okay.
Monday and Thursday. So obviously I'm playing a lot of Pokemon every day with all sorts of different people at all sorts of different levels. But what's happening is I'm doing 8 to 9 hours of hyper analyzing and practicing all sorts of different matchups, hyper analyzing each and every turn, figuring out win conditions, really aiming to convey like how my opponent could possibly win, but also how I could possibly beat them, therefore what they need to do to prepare. And I think since I started doing this full time, I don't think it's a coincidence that I do well because I'm also doing so much coaching that like I'm just playing a lot of Pokemon, right? And then outside of that, I do talk a lot with Mike and Ross, Mike Fouché. We don't play together as often as any of us would like, just because we're all 3 adults, right? We're not 16 years old anymore who can dedicate their whole summer to playing Pokemon.
Right.
We have many other things to do, but we do discuss a lot, and so I would say they are my main testing partners, if you will, or my main like
you can bounce ideas off of.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Cool. And then Mike and Gordon as well from Canada, they've also been helping out a lot, especially recently. And yeah, like we're bouncing ideas back and forth. Now, in terms of the metagame, I think, I don't know, like last year, I feel like I made a good call with Regigigas, but I missed the fact that Flying Pikachu was making such a big comeback at Worlds. And like trying to extrapolate from last year to this year. Last year we had Azul win with Arceus Flying Pikachu, and then the online tournament scene was filled with Palkia and Arceus Inteleon, right? Those were the top 2 decks fighting it out. Flying Pikachu was nowhere to be seen, and then on day 1 of Worlds, Palkia dominated, and then what did we get? Arceus Flying Pikachu on day 2, winning the whole event, right? So if we take that like past events and try to learn from them, which is always useful. We had a big Arceus showing this weekend. We had at NAC, we had like a big anti-Gardevoir, anti-Lost Bug sort of thing going on for the top decks, for the top performing decks. And then now, which led to a lot of Arceus, right? And Rapid Strike winning. And now in the online tournament scene, what we are seeing is a lot of Giratina, which obviously dominates Arceus, and dominates the Urshifu matchup as well, and has a pretty like even matchup spread across the board, right? So then for day 1, I would imagine there's going to be a reaction to that. But what is a reaction to Giratina? Maybe it's Gardevoir back again. Maybe it's Turbo Lost Bug, since they can beat them in the price trade-off, and then the speed to getting to Sableye and whatnot. So day 1, we also have to factor in the fact that any tie is essentially a loss, so that also discourages Lost Bugs and Gardevoir. So I don't know, it's really messy. I'm very thankful that I have the day to invite. But in terms of like, I feel like the metagame of day 1 will definitely be skewed, because last year we had like a lot of V-Star and V-Max decks, right? But this time we do have single price decks that, of course, can potentially lead to more ties. Yeah, and I feel like that in itself could be a whole other discussion, as you mentioned in the beginning. I feel like that's more down to players not recognizing when a game is over and being able to scoop it up quickly enough to be able to play a full 3 games. I think that's more at fault, and also a potential opponent who is playing to stall out the time, right? Which has been a big controversy as of late, and I myself experienced a bunch at EUIC. But anyways, having said that, I feel like the day 1 metagame is not going to be like a really big or a great representation of what's going to happen on day 2, when ties are now part of a normal run and you can tie to a top 8 run. So what I've been doing is like mostly the format feels super, super even. I don't think there's a standout like top tier deck. Perhaps Gardevoir, but it's edge compared to the rest of the decks. I don't think it's big enough to call it an S tier deck like Lugia was before rotation. So honestly, right now it feels like pick your favorite deck, and hope you run good, because you have a chance to beat everything. Everything has a chance to beat you. So enjoy the experience. I generally try doing I tried being innovative, but last season I was able to come up with a quad choice bolted Regigigas deck. This year I tried similar innovative things. I tried standardish things. I feel like there's maybe room to be spicy within an established archetype, but something completely out of the blue, I tried and I wasn't able to do it. Yeah, maybe someone else will, but I wasn't able to. And I drew the line last Saturday when I played a pure single prize Lost Box deck featuring Zamazenta, Kyogre. It's not the most original deck, but it's also something that's definitely not on the radar of many people. But I failed miserably. So I drew the line. I was like, okay, stop innovating. Last 2 weeks, focus on the tried and tested and combine a very powerful deck with your powerful decision making. Hope the luck works out. And that's my approach for this Worlds.
I like that. Because I think me and you have talked about innovation because I'm out there always trying to play something that I probably shouldn't be playing, uh, but it's a cool thing to see. And like, what's your thoughts on having like we had the meta with where Lugia was obviously the best deck, and now like you said in this one, you're like, oh, there's 6 to 8 decks that are all good, and you just pick one and have fun with it. Like, would like as a competitor, I would assume you would rather see the Lugia meta where like you kind of got an idea of what everyone's playing, but as like someone who likes to play like different stuff, would you rather see this 8 to 10 decks or whatever that's the meta right now?
I very much prefer the hyper concentrated meta. And I
Okay.
prefer for there to be a top tier deck where I know if I play it and I consider myself above average, therefore I can make better decisions than most of my opponents. I'll be able to have an edge just because of how inherently powerful the deck is. Whereas right now, no matter which deck I pick, there's not that big of an advantage because of the deck. So I usually prefer the highly concentrated metagames because it's also easier to find that gap. Yeah, it's easier to find a gap that attacks 2 or 3 of the top decks, and then you fail miserably against 2 others, but those are not popular enough. As opposed to you find a gap in 2 or 3 right now, but the other 5, yeah, completely destroy you. So then there's not a lot of room to be that unless, for example, you play Darkrai and you hit 5 VMAX decks on day 2. Yeah,
Exactly.
sure. Like that happens, sure. Yeah, you'll be successful with Darkrai, but overall, that's not something I
Not
can count.
competitive.
Yeah, or I want
Yeah,
to count on at least.
that's good. That's good. So let's just wrap this up. What are your predictions of like? Obviously, you're not gonna tell me what you play. I'm not gonna ask you that, but like your predictions for what top 8 will look like at Worlds, and another thing is, I think region wise, I think a lot of people like to think that NA is not very good. We haven't showed up at Worlds very often. EU's been pretty good at Worlds. We see Australia. Like, do you think different regions like the metas are different, and like how do you think top 8 will pan out?
So, in terms of the regions, I've always advocated at how Pokemon is an individual game. Yeah, regardless of
Yeah,
what region you're in, like, because you could say, like, look at, sure, NA hasn't shown up at Worlds, right? But NA
hmm,
won AUIC and the whole of top 8 at NAIC, yeah, despite the
true.
best players of Latin America, Oceania, and Europe being there. Um, all 8 players were from NA, yeah. So I feel like it's too random to really say, oh, NA is a weak region or weaker, or they don't dedicate themselves too much. Or worlds like we have some of the most dedicated players all over the world,
Yeah.
so that's something that I don't really pay much attention to. But now, in terms of predictions, like you said, you're not gonna ask me what I'm playing for Worlds. I honestly, my 100% answer is I honestly wish I I knew what I was playing.
Okay,
Just
cool.
I leave for Japan tomorrow. I wish I was only bringing like 1 or 2 decks. This time I'm bringing all my cards because I'm still very indecisive. I know which decks I'm not playing, but I still have a
Okay.
library of 5 to 6 decks that I'm just like every time I feel like okay, this is the one, and then it craps out on me, and then I choose another one, and this is the one, and then it craps out on me. So this is one of the worlds that I'm feeling the least confident in my not in my skill, but in my deck
Deck
choice.
choice. Yeah.
And now, in terms of predictions, though, I think like there's a lot of question marks regarding like we know very little about the qualification process for worlds for like Asian countries, right? Like
True.
Japan, Thailand, Singapore, all of those countries. We have very little information, or at least I have very little
I
information.
know.
And what we do know is Mew keeps on winning in Asia, right?
It's
So I don't know
true.
if that's going to skew the metagame or not, especially on day 1. But now, in terms of top 8, honestly, we could have 8 different decks. Yeah, it could be
Okay.
Guardy, Lost Bugs, Giratina, Mew, 2 different Arceus variants, and Miraidon, because somehow Miraidon always, there's always that one Miraidon. Yeah,
That's
so
true. That's true.
I
All
honestly
right.
don't know.
That's good. I mean, I think other players are. I think the meta just shifts out that way, where like there's
Yeah.
nothing that like looks super dominant. Like even at NAIC, we had the Rapid Strike. that like I know people were had it on their radar, but no one was like putting it where it was going to win. And then I don't know, their top 8 run was like flawlessly just destroying everything. And then we'd never really seen anything like I don't even see it in online tournaments. Like no one's even talking about it, so that can make a resurgence. Like it's gonna be a fun Worlds to watch, and I'm sure we'll be out here cheering for you, and hopefully everybody watching this is cheering for you. And
Thank you.
it should. You're gonna keep playing Pokemon for ever, right? Like that's what I'm like.
I can.
I know.
Absolutely. Yes.
I know we were talking. You're like I'm casting retirement kind of thing, but I know a lot of casters don't play any events or they. But even when they do, like they make good runs too. So like it's usually really top players playing. Do you ever see yourself like I'm not gonna go for a Worlds invite? If your casting gets that high.
I mentioned retirement in terms of like the natural progression in sports, but I don't have we don't need the physical prowess in Pokemon, right?
True.
So as long as I can play, I will continue to play. And even like in a hypothetical situation where they take me to cast every single North American event, I would make it a point to then use some of that money to fly to the Latin American events or European events to be able to continue to compete. And today, in a couple hours, I'll be going to a league challenge to try and get one of my
there you go
for my 2024 Worlds invite, as well as a little bit of extra practice in real life. Yeah, but I am fully like as long as I can. The only reason I wouldn't go for a Worlds invite at this point in my life is if I started working for Pokemon, therefore I legally wouldn't be able to. Yeah, okay. But that's the only way, and I think my nationality will never allow me to do that anyway, so we're good to go on that front. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. We got a lot of good insight there. I hope you do really well at Worlds, man. I'm glad you're not retiring. And your coaching is one of the best. All I ever hear is good things about you. My buddy did the best he's ever done at a tournament, and he got all the coaching from you. And I see so many players that you coach do so well. So we need you at least coaching. So stay out there, do that.
Yeah, count on table on sticking around for a very long time. Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Well, guys, that's another episode of this Road to Worlds. We got a few more days until Worlds. Definitely cheer on Pablo, but for now, we're gonna scoop it up.